The Borderlands franchise is a fan favorite. It's the OG open world looter shooter, the one that so many of the live service games have ended up emulating. It received a 90 on Metacritic back in 2012 and was a huge upgrade from the first. It touts a wacky world, tons of loot, and crazy characters, making it the perfect blend of preteen humor and cartoony violence that gamers love. With players taking 30 hours to complete it, this thing is packed with content in ways games aren't anymore. So, 7 years later, does it still hold up? I've actually never played this game before, so the last month was me experiencing it for the first time. I wanted to try it out because Borderlands 3 is coming out in, April of 2020. Basically, I was figuring out if the franchise was for me with a $5 purchase instead of jumping in all willy-nilly. There has been an increase in the number of games that utilize comic book art styles. Most of them come from the indie space since it doesn't cost much to implement it. Even some of the bigger developers like Telltale used it in almost every single one of their releases. So to come back to one of the franchises that first made it popular was interesting to see. The overall style helped to smooth out the low resolution textures and low polygon count models. Borderlands 2 is a perfect example of style over resolution. As time continues to pass, the game can still hold up, except in cutscenes. Pre-rendered cutscenes were the norm back in 2012 and dragged the game back in time. It's a good thing that there were so few of them since they stuck out like a sore thumb. There is a high-resolution texture pack available, but the reception seems to be mixed, plus it might be as big as the game. All of that doesn't impact gameplay though. Borderlands is a series built on all of the discarded weapons that players will never use. Sifting through a mountain of guns is intrinsically tied to moment-to-moment decisions. Other than taking out loads of enemies, you will be looking for guns, selling guns, and making room in your backpack to carry more guns. It's all of the different stats for the 6 gun types that really inflate the amount you come across. You will always be on the hunt, looking for something that has more damage, that has a better status effect, or a brand new MVP to take care of all the bigger enemies. So let's talk about the actual combat. The movement is a little clunky and floaty, which seems to be a style choice that you just have to get used to. Shooting in this game is pretty good. The colored bullets when you shoot a gun that has a status effect is cool. Some of the gun sounds are nice, but overall the experience is above average. You are usually trying to get the guns to fire accurately, whether that is finding a gun with better accuracy, putting stat boost coins into weapon recoil reduction, or playing a zero and just meleeing everything. It's the ultimate gun RPG ever because comparing stats is critical for you to stay competitive with enemies. They get more health the farther you get in the game. They get weapons that do more damage. You know, classic RPG stuff. A modern discussion that happened a couple months ago with Assassin's Creed Odyssey is the idea of scaling enemies. Basically, the game will level up all the enemies to make every combat encounter a level playing field. So even after beating the game, if you go to the starting area, you won't find level 1 enemies to steamroll, but instead ones that match your level. I don't like this, and thankfully Borderlands 2 does not have it. So it was fun to go back to missions I had missed after beating the game and cleaning house without too much trouble. That's when the combat is at its best, when you feel like you are either playing smartly or figured out how to persevere through a long level. So if an enemy has a shield, you can use an electric weapon to get rid of it faster. You can use a gun with a fire effect to burn through enemy flesh, and even get corrosive weapons to deal with armored enemies like robots. It's this dance of switching weapons for the right occasion. It's delicate though, as getting an overpowered weapon will break that dance. If you have a gun that can deal a lot of damage in one shot, then there is no use in switching weapons. This doesn't predictably happen since gun drops are random, stats on those guns are random, but it did happen. Towards the end of the game, I received a weapon that did more damage than anything I had, so I used it for everything. It did so much damage that I didn't have to participate in the dance anymore. No more switching out for corrosive weapons when fighting loader bots, no more electric weapons to deal with shields, it was just 1,000 damage a shot from my pistol. The other part of the equation of combat is the enemies that you face. There is a good enough variety in the different types of people you will be killing. It's the enemy AI that I have a problem with. You will get a mix of enemies in a group. There are ones that will charge you, ones that slowly barrel towards you, and ones that stay farther away. It's the ones that stay a distance away that makes this game really frustrating. Since you are always wrestling with weapon accuracy, if an enemy is too far away, your sniper might not be able to hit them. If you get a group of enemies that only try and snipe you with their non-sniper weapons, then you have to run at them, taking a bunch of damage in the process. I should also mention that once you die, you actually have a chance to continue in the fight. All you have to do is kill an enemy and you'll immediately respawn with some health. So with that in mind, it's really infuriating when there are suicide bombers by themselves. So they get to kill you with no other enemies around for you to try and kill and get back up. These problems are usually associated more with the open areas on the map. Borderlands 2 is configured in a way where there are open spaces mixed with more traditional linear areas. So imagine an open space that has a corridor attached to it which leads to a linear path that you follow. It's like if you took a Far Cry outpost and stuck it next to a tunnel that leads to a Call of Duty single-player mission. So this provides a weird mix of situations where enemy AI is tailored to those linear sections. So you're in this big open world, but the main quest line mostly takes place on these linear parts of the map. That's why you can have suicide enemies work alongside snipers that stay in the back. It kind of breaks when you take them out of that situation. I guess I should move on to the world now that I have stumbled into it. The world of Borderlands 2 is massive. There are so many different areas, large branching maps that aren't even accessible from the fast travel stations, which require you to spend a chunk of time just traveling. I've already commented about the mix of linear sections with more familiar open world spaces, but the truth is that even those open world pieces are just expanded linear sections. It actually has a lot in common with how God of War structured its open world map. It mostly has to do with scale. Is the bit you're traveling to going to be long, or is it going to be short? This approach has a more handcrafted feel rather than wondering if your map was big just to tout its size. There are a lot of locations though. You really do travel to a lot of places that are all utilized to varying degrees. You visit places like the Dust a lot, but only visit
Claptrap's place
once. With all those locations, you do end up seeing a lot of the same enemies and a lot of the same structures. I won't go as far as to say assets are copy and pasted, because they aren't, but I definitely notice the same stuff in different areas. But the world is nothing without the characters in it. This is where Borderlands is untouchable. When you hear about all of the disappointment gamers have for all the live service games that come out, a big chunk of that comes from the lack of compelling story. Destiny and Destiny 2 failed to deliver anything compelling. Anthem faked having a BioWare quality story, and even Fallout 76 forewent even putting NPCs in the game. Borderlands 2 shows off how well its characters are represented and how much fun it has letting the player experience that. There are whole side missions dedicated to providing more information about different characters. I scrapped a completely scripted video about building up a character I had the pleasure of interacting with a handful of times that I never got to see again. It's crazy how well this game is able to make you interested in people, care about them, and actively want to do side content to find out more about them. Each game in the series is built to steadily grow the cast of characters by using previous playable ones to fill out the world going forward. So in Borderlands 2, a lot of the characters you interact with were the people who you could play in the first game. This allows for the depictions of these characters to be strong right off the bat, since the devs already know who these people are. Their humor is pitch perfect, there is nothing ambiguous about them. It's honestly really refreshing to play an open world game that has such a great cast of characters. The fact that there are so many of them, and they all get moments to shine, is what pushes this over the top for me. Interestingly enough, everyone praises the story of Borderlands 2. It's okay. It's nothing really special, and I think that people are just confusing character work for story here. All of this greatness is accompanied by some less than stellar aspects though. The introduction of new characters dries up and you feel that loss. It's not like the game needed to pull a Red Dead 2 and add characters up until the very last moment, but it makes the locations you visit less interesting. It's very comparable to Yooka-Laylee, in which the same cast of characters are used in new locations instead of having people from that given region give you side missions. It actually starts happening 3/4 into the game. This also marks where I noticed a shift in gameplay, more fetch quests, less interesting characters, and worse designed levels. Compared to all of the love and care that went into the earlier sections, these were mediocre. There might have been too much content. It could have been a rush job to get the game out on time. It's actually a big red mark on the entire experience, which is all summed up by the location Lynchwood. This place is a perfect example of how the game starts to suck. You are surrounded by enemies that pop out of nowhere which seem to continuously spawn, until they don't. You have the most egregious joke side mission in the whole game, and even the main questline that takes you through here is dumb. The whole time you're just bouncing across the map fighting the same enemies over and over while you get characters talking to you over the radio. So much of this part of the game can be described like that. No new fun characters, dumb level layout, and a feeling of laziness. The worst part is this feeling never really goes away. The mission design and any negative aspect that you can think of is present throughout, but it's when you hit this point it becomes a glaring issue. All the way up to the end you will be scratching your head thinking, how did it get this bad? The easiest answer is that you don't see any more new things. All the cards are on the table and there are 3+ hours of the game left. Even the final boss is god awful. I mean, compared to the first game, it's a step up, but that's like comparing a mobile game to Gone Home. At least it's almost a game. I was tired after finishing the game. I was done scavenging for ammo, shooting the same enemies, and running around killing hundreds of them. I decided that I was not going to play Borderlands, the pre-sequel, because it was just going to be more of the same. All of this ending negativity will not make me forget about the good time I had, though. The first 20 hours of this game was a blast. I got dunked into a world swirling with lore, cool characters, fun missions, and I wouldn't trade that for anything. There are a lot of caveats that this game has, but it is far and above a good game. It makes me really excited to play Borderlands 3 in 2020 and totally on board if the world is expanded in any other way. I had the pleasure of experiencing Tales from the Borderlands from the aforementioned Telltale, and it was pretty great. It really shows that the world of Borderlands, its characters, and the stories that can be told is what is keeping the franchise flourishing half a decade after a big release. It's totally worth playing and really fun. I should know, I spent 40 hours playing it. Whoops. I found it really funny that the ending is straight out of Assassin's Creed 1. I mean, it's pretty funny.